Good morning, all. Today's class, we're going to look at DNA, and you had a short introduction into that with the video that you watched last week, and most of you did very well on that. So we're going to look at the chapter 9. We're going to look at the first 11 slides of the PowerPoint that I sent out. So I want to go over a few things as we go, okay? The first slide deals with the ideal that yes, DNA has now become the go-to tool when it comes to forensic testing. Okay, even a small amount of DNA can be used for so many different things. Plus, on top of that, because of remember the CSI effect that we looked at the very beginning of the year, most juries, when they're looking for especially capital cases, are looking to see if there's any DNA evidence because, you know, with DNA evidence, they believe that there's no mistake, okay? Not always the case, but that's what they believe, that there's no mistake, that if the DNA says it's you, then it's you, okay? So then we go to the second slide, and the part of the DNA that most people look at is the ideal that each piece of DNA, no matter what it is, even if you're identical twins, is that it's going to be exactly unique to the individual. No two persons, no matter who they are, no matter what they are going to have things. Even if they're identical twins, there are still going to be small changes in their DNA that will make them unique. The one thing that they look at, for the most part, is the ideal of a gene, which is a sequence of DNA nucleotides that goes from, let's say, A to G or whatever it may be over a period of time, and it codes for different things throughout. It is what gives you your color of your hair, the color of your eyes, the color of your skin, your attitude toward life, all comes from genes. And most of that is inherited from your parents. However, some is unique because it's a combination of your parents, which makes them unique for you, okay? Each gene is composed of several different things, okay? And what a gene does basically is a task. It makes a protein that shows itself. So we have phenotype and we have genotype. The genotype is like the recipe in a cookbook, and the phenotype is what the food looks like when you're done. Same thing with you. Your genotype is the genes that are in your body. The phenotype is, geez, you got red hair, you got, you know, blonde hair, you got blue eyes, you got green eyes, you got brown eyes, whatever it may be, okay? All those things come from that. All these little things, these great big things, are made of little things, nucleotides, which you should already know about from the last video. A nucleotide is nothing but a sugar, a phosphorus, and a base, okay? There's only 4 bases, so it shouldn't be that hard to look at those. A's, T's, and G's and C's. A's and T's, G's and C's. So A's always go with T's, T's always go with A's, G's always go with C's, and C's always go with G's. They never mix. And if they do mix, and if there is an issue, they'll fall apart. However, you can have a change in that sequence. And if you have a indiscriminate change in the sequence, we call that a mutation. And sometimes it's the mutations that we look for because it makes it really easy to find, okay? There are the 4 bases on number 5. When you get to number 6, it starts talking about how the bases come together, okay? They are double helix. The double helix is twisted. These things you should learn in biology, okay? And they all kind of base pair together, which we just went over a few seconds ago, okay? Then from there, the DNA basically then makes a bunch of amino acids. These amino acids are usually made up of 3 or more, but mostly just 3. There's a few that are more when it comes to making a code, okay? So if you have a particular code, a GAG for something, it's glutamine, okay? You have a CGT, then that's aniline. Well, they give you the whole group here on the next one. I'm not requiring you to learn all these, okay? These are just all the amino acids. But if you look at all these amino acids, they are make every protein in the body. Everything that you are is made of these amino acids. That's why it's very important to get a lot of protein in your diet. In order for all these little proteins together or to go together, then there's things that you need to do, the carbohydrates. That's why you need to have a balanced diet between proteins and carbohydrates, and not just eating one thing or the other, because it will not help your DNA make these proteins. And if these proteins are not made, then you're not going to have very good health. Okay. It gives you a good eye here. You got two different things on. You got normal hemoglobin, with hemoglobin is the protein in your blood that carries oxygen. Okay. And if you have normal hemoglobin, there's the protein recipe for it. It's right there in front of you. The valine, the histidine, the leucine, that all comes together, makes hemoglobin. It twists up in a little ball, and inside that little ball, it will carry an oxygen to your cells, and your cells will get oxygen in that way. However, if you happen to have a genetic disease, such as sickle cell anemia, okay, what happens then is that something gets out of place. You look down there at 6, that's the one that's out of place, okay? And just because it's out of place, it causes the way that that protein balls up to a little ball to change. The protein structure changes. And when it does, it can't carry oxygen as well, okay? And if it can't carry oxygen as well, then that's where you get the anemia, because you don't have as much blood, or you don't have as much oxygen in your blood, which then causes you to have several issues. Sickle cell anemia is mostly with African Americans, but it can come out of other individuals who have, had race, blood mixed within them. But for the most part, it comes out of that. It tends to have a evolutionary background, if you go way back when, I guess, to the ideal that these people have actually developed a way to be immune to malaria. However, it does shorten their life period because of the sickle cell anemia, but they'll never die from malaria. Where if you have a normal hemoglobin, getting malaria is, if you're in certain parts of the world, is pretty much a foregone conclusion. Okay. Now, your whole health, everything basically depends on those proteins that we just talked about, how you make those proteins and how you do everything with those proteins. But they also are the basis for all diseases and health issues. So when your body gets sick, it gets sick because the proteins are not being made correctly. Coronavirus, we just, it's all over the news now. We're dealing with it. Everybody's dealing with it. Well, what's it do? It's a virus. Well, what does that virus do? It gets inside your cells and it hijacks the process of you making proteins. Instead of you making proteins, let's say it's your cell, right now they're saying that it gets into your lungs quite a bit. Well, instead of making the hemoglobin protein in the cells for your lungs to carry oxygen, it starts making more viruses. And that's what it does. It hijacks your process and tells you to make more viruses. Even though you don't want to, that's what it does. And when it makes those more and more viruses, it just basically makes you sick and sick, because now you've got all these viruses that are bad proteins in your body. And on top of that, you're not getting all the oxygen that you really need, because it's going after those cells and making those cells do something that they are not designed to do. And that's how you get sick. From there, that all comes down to the next one. And this is the process that it hijacks, the replication process. The replication process is the next process, happens in the system of your body. And all it basically does is it goes through the ideal of this is how a cell replicates itself, okay? But it starts on a very small process. You're building a house, the very first thing you do is dig a hole, okay? Then from there, you gotta put a foundation in, and then you can start putting piece by piece, wood by wood. Well, that's the same thing when it comes to DNA. When you build a human, it starts with a very small protein, one cell at one time, that is basically, that came together, at the time of conception. And from there, basically, it grows into whoever you are, all the cells that you have, and all the different things that those cells do. To do this, it has to go through this replication process. Most of the time, a cell will take and divide itself and makes an exact copy of itself, okay? For us as humans, we call those stem cells. And what a stem cell is basically a basic cell that can do anything it wants to do. It can become whatever it needs to. It's a basic building block of a human. Then from there, it says, well, I want to be a skin cell. Well, it makes the stem cell. The stem cell changes at a certain time. It becomes a human cell, skin cell, whatever it may be, or a nose cell, or an eye cell, or something to do with your foot and your fingernails. It doesn't matter. It just basically, that's how they all start as a stem cell, and they move out from there. To do this, the cell basically takes the DNA and it unwraps it, okay? And what it does is just basically tears it apart. It's got its own proteins that do that, okay? And we're not going to go through the entire, this is about point of what it happens. That would just be boring, hopefully. But it basically tears it apart. Once it tears it apart, it takes and puts a bunch of nucleotides on the inside, and they match up. Once they match up, then it starts making the protein that it's supposed to make, okay? When they are doing this, it uses something called free nucleotides. And free nucleotides are nothing but those little things, that base, that sugar, and that nitrogen, all basically put together, floating around in the cell, and it just pops into place when it sees that it's going to. I know at the very beginning of the year, I kind of said, when it comes to being anything human, it really comes down to that one thing you learned way back in the 3rd grade, that a positive thing will attract a negative thing. And it all comes down to charges. Well, the same thing happens when it comes to chemistry and biochemistry in your body. It really does come down to charges. And those things that have the charge that they want to attract each other, they come and they attract each other all through those charges, okay? And then we get to 11. 11 just basically shows you how it took the DNA and tore it apart, and it's floating around in there, and it's unwound, okay? And that is where we're going to stop for today.